I can still feel the cold plastic of that office chair against my back as Caleb leaned across the table, his expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Nina, you're being let go," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're just too expensive. We can hire 3 bright engineers for your salary." My stomach dropped as if I'd stepped off a cliff. HR slid a thin brown envelope toward me. Just 2 months, severance for my 22 years at Orion Freight Logistics. 22 years building their entire system from nothing. 22 years of loyalty. 22 years erased with a single sentence. I sat frozen, barely breathing, as Caleb checked his phone, clearly bored with ending my career. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. Instead, they lay perfectly still on my lap as I stared at the smudge-free glass table where I'd presented countless solutions over the years. The same table where the old CEO, Bennett Orion himself, once called me the backbone of the company. Now I was just an expense to cut, an outdated line item on a budget spreadsheet. I said nothing. What was there to say? I'd seen this coming for months, but somehow, the reality still felt like a punch to the chest. My mind raced back to my first day at Orion, 22 years ago. The company was just 6 trucks and 2 dusty computers in a warehouse that smelled like motor oil and coffee. Bennett hired me fresh out of college with my computer science degree. "We need someone to build us something stable," he'd said, showing me around the tiny dispatch office. I remember the first system I built. Basic routing software that tracked shipments on a digital map instead of the paper logs they'd been using. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. Over the years, that simple program grew into something incredible. I coded during lunch breaks, stayed late, worked weekends. The system evolved into a complex freight automation platform that handled everything: routing, scheduling, fuel optimization, driver management, client billing. It was perfectly tuned to Orion's needs because I built every piece of it myself. When management refused my requests for documentation resources, I kept going anyway. The system became an extension of me, complex but efficient. Only I truly understood how all the parts worked together. That wasn't by design. It was just what happened when one person builds something massive with minimal support. 3 years ago, everything changed. Private equity firm Zenith Capital bought Orion. Bennett retired to his fishing cabin in Montana. The new owners rebranded, modernized the logo, and brought in fresh leadership. That's when Caleb arrived as our new CTO, with his MBA and his perfect smile. He didn't know freight, but he knew optimization and cost-cutting. In our first meeting, he asked why we needed so many senior employees. Legacy costs, he called us. I noticed how he studied my salary during budget reviews, his eyes lingering too long on the number. He talked constantly about standardization and industry norms. The writing was on the wall in bold letters. I just didn't want to read it. Every day brought new warnings. Canceled projects, restructured teams, younger hires straight from coding boot camps who worked for half my salary. My husband Rick noticed it before I admitted it to myself. "They're getting ready to push you out," he said. One night over dinner, I shook my head. "They can't run the system without me." I believed that would protect me. I was wrong. 6 months before my firing, Caleb hired 3 recent graduates to learn the system. Jake, Mia, and Tyler, all smart kids with fresh degrees and no real-world experience. Caleb introduced them as my new team members, but everyone knew they were my replacements. I was told to teach them everything, so I did. I showed them the dispatch module, the routing algorithms, the billing system. But teaching 22 years of knowledge isn't simple. The system wasn't just code. It was years of patches and workarounds built on specific business needs. When Jake asked why certain data tables were structured so weirdly, I explained how they connected to legacy carrier systems from 2005. When Mia questioned the outdated scheduling logic, I showed her how it accommodated the union driver contracts. Tyler struggled most with the interdependencies, how changing one part could break 3 others if you didn't understand the connections. I could see the confusion in their eyes. They were taking notes, but they didn't get it. Not really. How could they? They were trying to learn in months what had taken me decades to build. 2 weeks before my firing, I realized I'd stopped getting invites to strategy meetings. My access to certain development servers was quietly revoked. The three shadows spent more time with Caleb and less time with me. That night, I sat at our kitchen table with Rick, picking at my dinner. "They're definitely phasing me out," I admitted finally. Rick reached for my hand. "You've known this was coming. Maybe it's time to update your resume." I nodded, but part of me still couldn't believe they'd actually do it. "They won't risk losing me," I said. "The whole operation runs on my system. Everything would fall apart." Rick gave me a sad smile. "Maybe that's exactly why they would. Some executives can't stand feeling dependent on anyone." His words hit me like cold water. He was right. Caleb saw my expertise as a threat, not an asset. I was a single point of failure in his streamlined vision. The next day, I backed up my personal files and began clearing out my desk drawer, one item each day so nobody would notice. I was preparing for the inevitable. Back in the termination meeting, Caleb was wrapping up. "We appreciate your years of service, Nina," he said, checking his watch. The standard corporate goodbye. I signed where HR pointed and stood up quietly. No outburst, no tears, no begging to keep my job. I walked to my desk and collected the last few items. A photo of Rick and me at the Grand Canyon, a mug my niece made, and a small plush truck the warehouse guys gave me on my 10th work anniversary. 22 years packed into a single cardboard box. A few coworkers tried to catch my eye as I walked out, but most looked away. Nobody wanted to be associated with the person who'd just been cut. I understood. They were afraid for their own jobs. As I reached the exit, I paused for a moment, looking back at the system displays on the wall, the colorful maps showing hundreds of trucks moving across the country, all guided by my code. My legacy. I wondered how long it would last without me. Not long, I suspected. Not long at all. 3 days after my termination, my phone buzzed with a text from Rafik, my friend in database administration. "System crashed. Shipment scheduling engine is down. Drivers not getting routes. Packages piling up at Chicago terminal." I wasn't surprised, just disappointed. It happened so quickly. The scheduling system needed regular maintenance, a fact I'd mentioned in my hasty handover notes. I typed a response, then deleted it. This wasn't my problem anymore. An hour later, another text came through. "Something's wrong with the geosync layer. Jake can't figure it out. Mia is panicking." The geosync layer was tricky. It connected our mapping software with the real-time driver tracking. I'd built it 6 years ago during a particularly inspired weekend. It worked perfectly, but required specific handling during system updates. I tried to explain this to Tyler, but he'd been texting under the table during my explanation. I put my phone down and went for a walk. The spring air felt good after years in that air-conditioned office. Birds were singing. The world was moving on, and so was I. A week after my firing, Caleb called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was exactly what I expected. "Hey Nina, hope you're doing well. Quick question about your code. It'll just take 5 minutes of your time." His voice had lost that smug confidence from the termination meeting. Now it had a hint of desperation. I deleted the message without listening to the rest. 5 minutes wouldn't solve anything. The system wasn't failing because of a simple bug. It was failing because it needed someone who understood it at a fundamental level. Someone like me. Later that day, my phone lit up with 3 more calls from Orion's main number. I declined them all. Rick watched me from across the living room, eyebrows raised. "Not going to help them?" he asked. I shook my head. They didn't value my knowledge when they had it. $200 an hour would be my consulting rate now. We both knew Caleb would never agree to that. His whole purpose had been to reduce costs. Paying me contractor rates would defeat his entire plan. Besides, I wasn't interested in rescue missions. Some bridges once burned stay that way. 2 weeks after my firing, Rafik called instead of texting. "It's bad, Nina," he said, his voice low like he was hiding in a supply closet. "There's a data corruption issue affecting billing across 6 states. Clients are getting wrong invoices. Some aren't getting billed at all." I closed my eyes, picturing the chaos. The billing system was integrated with the routing database. If one failed, the other would follow. "That's not all," Rafik continued. "We're losing track of freight manifests. Shipments are arriving at terminals with incorrect paperwork or none at all. Clients are pulling contracts." I felt a twinge of sadness for my former colleagues dealing with this mess. They didn't deserve the fallout from Caleb's decisions. An hour later, an email arrived from Caleb himself. Nina, we need your expertise. We're prepared to offer $300 HAR for consultation services. I laughed out loud. $300 was a lot of money, but not enough to fix a system in complete meltdown. Not nearly enough to solve problems that had been deliberately created when they decided my experience wasn't worth keeping. I declined the offer with a brief, professional email. Then, I continued updating my resume. 3 weeks after leaving Orion, I received an email that changed everything. The subject line read, "Your work has not gone unnoticed." It was from Patricia Liu, CTO at Lucent Mobility, one of Orion's rising competitors. "We've admired your work from afar," she wrote. "Your freight automation system at Orion is legendary in our industry. Would you be interested in meeting to discuss opportunities with us?" I read the email 3 times, letting the words sink in. Someone had noticed. Someone understood the value of what I'd built. I showed Rick the message over dinner. "You should definitely meet with them," he said, squeezing my hand. "See what they're offering." I nodded, a small spark of excitement flickering to life inside me. After weeks of rejection and doubt, this felt like validation. I replied to Patricia, agreeing to meet the following week. That night, I slept better than I had since the firing. Morning brought another email. This one from Delta Connect, Orion's largest client. They wanted to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Things were starting to move in unexpected directions. Maybe getting fired wasn't the end I thought it was. Maybe it was a beginning. The doorbell rang at 8:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, 4 weeks after my termination. I opened the door to find Rafiq standing on my porch, looking nervous. "Can I come in?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder like he was being followed. Inside, he pulled out his laptop. "You need to see this," he said, voice barely above a whisper. He showed me emails he'd found in a hidden archive folder on the server, correspondence between Caleb and Zenith Capital's board. The messages dated back months before my firing. Caleb had a detailed plan to eliminate senior technical staff across all departments. Phase 1, shadow period. Phase 2, knowledge transfer. Phase 3, termination of high-cost resources. That's what I was to them. A high-cost resource. The goal wasn't just cost-cutting. It was increasing Orion's valuation before selling the company again. Fewer senior staff meant lower ongoing costs, which made the financials look better to potential buyers. It was all about the exit strategy. Caleb wasn't hired to improve Orion. He was hired to prepare it for flipping, like a house getting a fresh coat of paint before going on the market. I felt sick reading it, but not surprised. The corporate playbook was older than both of us. The worst email in Rafiq's archive was from Caleb to the board chairman, sent 2 months before my firing. "Nina's system is too complex," he wrote. "She made herself indispensable on purpose. If we replace her with standardized processes, we regain control of our technology stack." I read that line again, rage flooding my chest like hot water. I had never intentionally complicated anything. The system's complexity grew organically over 2 decades of business changes and rapid scaling. I'd begged for more engineers, for documentation resources, for modernization budgets, all denied in favor of keeping costs lean. And now they painted me as some kind of saboteur? The unfairness burned. But only for a moment. I breathed deeply, letting the anger dissolve. In its place came clarity. This was exactly what I should have expected from executives who saw people as line items. "Are you going to be okay?" Rafiq asked, watching my face. I nodded. "Better than okay. This confirms what I already knew." I was never the problem. The problem was a system that valued quick profits over people and knowledge. And somewhere deep inside, I'd always known that. Now I had proof. The Lucent Mobility offices were nothing like Orion's. Sunlight streamed through large windows. Plants thrived in corners. People looked up and smiled as Patricia showed me around. No fluorescent headaches here. Patricia's offer was straightforward. Chief Freight Systems Architect. Full autonomy to build a next-generation logistics platform. A salary 30% higher than my old one. Profit sharing. And most importantly, respect for my expertise. "We want to create something revolutionary," she said. "Something built right from the ground up." I studied her face for signs of the corporate doublespeak I'd grown accustomed to at Orion. I found none. Just genuine enthusiasm and clear vision. "I'd have a real team?" I asked. She nodded. 6 senior engineers to start, growing as needed, plus documentation specialists, QA analysts, the works. It was everything I'd been denied for years. "When can I start?" I asked. Patricia beamed. "How's Monday?" As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in months. Maybe years. This wasn't just a new job. It was freedom from a system that never valued what I had to offer. It was a chance to build something the right way. And deep down, a chance to show Orion exactly what they'd thrown away. Exactly 5 weeks after firing me, Caleb showed up at my front door. His appearance shocked me. Wrinkled clothes, bloodshot eyes, hair uncombed. This wasn't the polished executive who'd terminated me with a smirk. This was a desperate man at the end of his rope. "Mina, please," he said before I could speak. "The whole system is down. Completely down. Nothing's moving. We've lost tracking on over 300 shipments. Clients are screaming. The board is asking questions. We need you." For a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction seeing him so undone. Then it passed. I had no interest in revenge. "I have an interview tomorrow," I lied, not mentioning I'd already accepted Lucent's offer. "I'm moving forward, Caleb." He stepped closer, almost begging. "We'll double your old salary, triple your severance, whatever you want." I shook my head. "It's not about money. It never was." I closed the door gently but firmly. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a full minute, shoulders slumped, before walking back to his car. I felt no joy in his suffering, only certainty that I was on the right path by walking away. Rafiq called the next day as I was signing my Lucent employment contract. "Orion's in total collapse mode," he said. "The junior engineers tried to restore from backups, but they don't understand the recovery protocols. They've corrupted months of transactional logs." I winced. The backup system required specific steps in a precise order. I documented this, but apparently no one had read my notes. "That's not all," Rafiq continued. "Caleb hired outside consultants to untangle your code. 3 different firms. None of them can make sense of it fast enough." Again, I felt that twinge of sadness for my former colleagues. The warehouse workers, the drivers, the customer service reps. They were all suffering because of decisions made by people who would never feel the consequences themselves. "How are you doing?" I asked Rafiq. "Terrible," he admitted. "Everyone's working 16-hour days. The atmosphere is toxic. People are updating their resumes between firefighting sessions." I thanked him for the update and promised to keep in touch. After hanging up, I sat quietly with my thoughts. Orion was reaping what its leadership had sown. It wasn't satisfying, it wasn't vindicating, it was just sad. In my 3rd week at Lucent, something unexpected happened. Delta Connect, Orion's largest client, responsible for nearly 30% of their revenue, reached out directly to Patricia. "Can your team handle our logistics by next quarter?" their operations director asked during a video call I was invited to join. "We're experiencing challenges with our current provider." He was diplomatic, but his meaning was clear. They were jumping ship. Patricia looked at me, eyebrows raised in question. I knew Delta Connect's needs intimately. Their unique routing requirements, their specialized billing procedures, their tight delivery windows. "Yes," I said carefully, "we can handle it. But we'll need time to build the right infrastructure." The director nodded, relief visible on his face. "Take whatever time you need. We're looking for stability, not speed." After the call, Patricia turned to me. "This could accelerate our growth by years." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of emotions. This was a huge opportunity for Lucent, for me. But it also meant another nail in Orion's coffin. I pushed the thought aside. Business was business. Orion had made their choice when they decided I was expendable. I dove into building Lucent's new freight system with a passion I hadn't felt in years. This time, everything was different. I had resources, support, a real team of talented engineers who respected my experience. Most importantly, I had the chance to do things right. I designed the system to be modular, each component standing alone but communicating seamlessly with others. Everything was thoroughly documented. Code was clean, commented, and peer-reviewed. We built automated testing into every stage. The architecture was team-based by design. No single person, not even me, was the sole keeper of any critical knowledge. I created onboarding materials that turned using the system into a learning experience. In our stand-ups, I encouraged questions and explained the why behind every decision. This wasn't just a system. It was the opposite of what Orion had forced me to build. It was sustainable, it was transparent, it was built to last beyond any single person. And secretly, it was everything I had always wanted to create, but never had the chance to. At Lucent, my experience wasn't a threat. It was my most valuable contribution. 2 months into my new role at Lucent, Rafik texted me. I quit today. So did half the IT department. He wasn't the first. A steady stream of Orion employees had been leaving since the system meltdown began. Some came to Lucent, where I helped them get interviews. Others scattered to different companies across the industry. A few even left tech altogether, burned out by the chaos of Orion's collapse. The exodus wasn't limited to IT. Account managers jumped ship as client complaints mounted. Logistics coordinators left as manual processes replaced automated ones. Even warehouse staff started looking elsewhere as shipment delays created impossible working conditions. Orion was bleeding talent in every department, and there seemed to be no way to stop the hemorrhage. What made you finally decide to leave? I asked Rafik when we met for coffee the next day. They're shifting blame, he said, stirring his latte absently, pointing fingers at everyone except the real problem. He didn't need to specify what or who the real problem was. We both knew. Caleb was desperately trying to save himself by sacrificing others, a classic move from the bad leadership playbook. Caleb called again in my 3rd month at Lucent. Against my better judgment, I answered. You designed it to break, didn't you? He accused, his voice tight with anger. You built it so only you could maintain it. The desperation in his tone had been replaced with something darker, the need to blame someone else for his failures. I took a deep breath before responding. No, Caleb, I said calmly. I built a system that evolved over 22 years with minimal support. I requested documentation resources every quarter for a decade. You can check the records. There was silence on the other end. Then why won't it work without you? He finally asked, his voice smaller. Because you refused to fund the only thing that would have kept it going without me. Knowledge transfer. Real knowledge transfer. Not a few weeks of shadowing. More silence. I could almost hear him processing this inconvenient truth. The board is looking for someone to blame, he said finally. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I'm sure they are, I replied. Goodbye, Caleb. I hung up and blocked his number. Some conversations can never reach a satisfying conclusion. This was one of them. 4 months after my firing, Orion's world imploded completely. Delta Connect officially terminated their contract, a $40 million annual loss. The announcement hit the industry news sites immediately. Orion's stock plummeted. Within days, 3 more major clients followed Delta Connect's lead. The board called an emergency meeting. By that evening, Caleb had been fired. Too little, too late. Investors were panicking. Zenith Capital's plans for a profitable flip had evaporated. Orion's valuation had dropped to less than half what it had been when I was terminated. The cost-cutting measure that was supposed to save money had instead destroyed the company's foundation. That evening, my phone displayed a name I hadn't seen in a long time. Bennett Orion, the founder himself, calling from retirement. We made a mistake, Nina, he said when I answered, his voice heavy with regret. A terrible mistake. I said nothing. What could I possibly say? Is there any way you'd consider coming back? Helping us rebuild, he asked. I thought about the team I'd assembled at Lucent, the system we were creating. The respect I'd found. I'm sorry, Bennett, I said gently. That chapter is closed. Sometimes there's no going back, only forward. In my 5th month at Lucent, Patricia called me into a meeting with the CEO, Elaine Winters. We're considering acquiring what's left of Orion, Elaine announced, studying my reaction carefully. I kept my face neutral, though my heart raced. Their valuation has dropped low enough to make it feasible, Patricia added. But we'd need someone who understands their systems to lead the integration. They both looked at me expectantly. I took a moment to collect my thoughts. Orion was a shell of its former self, but it still had assets, warehouses, trucks, client relationships that hadn't completely dissolved. Most importantly, it had people, good people who weren't responsible for the leadership failures. I'll do it, I said finally. But I have conditions. Elaine nodded, unsurprised. Name them. My terms were simple but non-negotiable. No mass layoffs of rank-and-file employees, retention bonuses for key staff who stayed through the transition, and a training program to bring everyone up to speed on the new systems. Elaine didn't hesitate. Agreed on all counts. As I left the meeting, I felt a strange sense of coming full circle. I had started my career building Orion's systems. Now I would help dismantle them, but in a way that preserved what was worth saving. Almost exactly 1 year after my termination, I walked through Orion's front doors again. The sign outside now read, Lucent Orion Freight Systems, a temporary name during the transition. The building looked the same, but the atmosphere was completely different. Gone was the buzz of a busy freight operation. Instead, there was a nervous hush, like everyone was holding their breath. My new title, Chief Integration Officer, felt strange on my security badge. Heads turned as I walked through the main floor. Some faces showed surprise, others relief. A few displayed hints of resentment, Caleb's allies who'd survived the purge. Most, though, just looked tired. The past year had been brutal for those who'd stayed. I made my way to what had once been Caleb's corner office, now mine. Inside, I found Patricia waiting. "How does it feel?" she asked as I set my laptop on the desk. I gazed out the window at the loading docks where I did not started my career 2 decades ago. Complicated, I answered honestly. This wasn't about revenge or vindication anymore. It was about rebuilding something broken, making it work again, maybe even making it better than before. My first all-hands meeting as integration officer packed the main conference room. Nervous energy filled the space as I stood at the podium. These people had watched colleagues disappear for months. Many expected to be next. "I'll start with what matters most," I said, meeting as many eyes as I could. "There will be no layoffs among operational staff." The tension in the room visibly lifted. Shoulders relaxed. A few people exchanged glances of relief. "Lucent didn't acquire Orion for its technology," I continued. "That's already gone. We acquired it for its people and its relationships. You are the value here." I outlined our integration plan. Gradual migration to Lucent systems, comprehensive training, open communication at every stage. "We'll do things right this time," I promised. Clear documentation, shared knowledge, real mentorship. The room was silent when I finished. Then, from the back, someone started clapping. Others joined in. The applause wasn't for me personally. It was for the hope I represented. Hope for stability after chaos. Hope for leadership that valued more than just bottom-line metrics. As the meeting dispersed, several longtime employees stopped to welcome me back. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a year, there was a sense that things might actually get better. 6 months into the integration, I proposed something unexpected to Lucent's board, a technical excellence division. Its purpose, to ensure no engineer ever felt as alone and overloaded as I once did at Orion. The division would focus on 3 areas: ongoing education for all technical staff, comprehensive documentation standards, and dedicated knowledge-sharing systems. The true value of technical expertise isn't in hoarding it, I explained during my presentation. It's in spreading it throughout the organization. I showed them the costs of knowledge silos, using Orion's collapse as Exhibit A. Then I outlined the benefits of my proposed approach: greater resilience, faster onboarding, better retention of top talent. When I finished, Elaine stood up and started applauding. The rest of the board joined in. "This isn't just good for our engineers," she said. "It's good business." The approval was unanimous. As I left the boardroom, Patricia caught up with me. "You've turned your worst experience into something positive," she observed. I nodded. That was exactly what I'd done. Not out of some noble character trait, but from necessity. The pain of being discarded had taught me what needed to change. And now I had the power to change it, for myself and for others. On my final day as Chief Integration Officer, I stood on Lucent's rooftop terrace, watching the freight yard below. Dozens of trucks moved efficiently through the loading bays, guided by the new system my team had built. In the distance, I could see the highway where our drivers were delivering shipments to businesses that counted on us. The integration was complete. Orion was fully absorbed into Lucent now, its name existing only in archived files. I thought about my journey, from young programmer to disposable employee to executive leader. The path hadn't been straight. It certainly hadn't been easy. But standing there, Watching the operation run smoothly, I felt something beyond satisfaction. I had built something to last. Not just the technology, but a new way of valuing knowledge and experience. This wasn't about revenge against Caleb or Zenith Capital. They were long gone from my thoughts. This was about legacy, about making sure no other talented person would be casually discarded because of their salary level or age. As the sun began to set, Patricia joined me on the terrace. "Ready for your new role?" she asked. Tomorrow, I would start as Lucent's first Chief Knowledge Officer. I smiled and nodded. More than ready. Sometimes getting fired isn't the end. Sometimes it's just the beginning of something much better.